Welcome back to our podcast, or podcast as we like to call it. And we have a very special guest that we are so excited about, and it is author AJ Jacobs.
Yes,
Thank you for
best-selling
having me.
author.
Yes, 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 yes. And so to incorporate to our discussion, we did kind of the month of love with February. One of Poe's loves is ciphers, or was ciphers, cryptograms, things like that. So we decided to incorporate that for this month's podcast. And so we have his book right here, and it is phenomenal. Loved reading it.
Thank you.
Just immersed myself in it. And so, AJ, if you want to talk a little bit about yourself for a minute.
Yeah, give us a little intro into you.
Yes.
Absolutely. I live in New York City. I'm a writer, nonfiction writer, mostly write books. Mostly where I try something out for a while, like a lifestyle, and then report back what I learned, how it made my life better, how it made my life weirder. So, for instance, one I did before this was called Thanks 1,000, where I went around the world and I thanked 1,000 people who had anything to do with my morning cup of coffee.
Wow.
So there were baristas and farmer, the logo designer, the truck driver, the folks who built the road for the truck driver, and so on. But I've always loved puzzles. I'm a huge puzzle nerd. And so I decided during quarantine, why not spend a couple of years deeply immersed in puzzles, and all kinds of puzzles, crossword puzzles, jigsaws, Sudoku, logic puzzles, and ciphers, which is where I ran across Edgar Allan Poe. I've been a fan of his writing, but I didn't know this aspect to him, that he was a cipher genius. So I wrote a little about it. It's sort of a small section in the book, but it's a fascinating side to this writer that I didn't know about.
Absolutely. And that's kind of like our whole reason for the 6 degrees of Edgar Allan Poe, because he has so many areas that people don't realize. Most people focus on just the horror. And so we both love puzzles. And
what kind of puzzles do you like?
Well, it's kind of neat. I've been doing jigsaw puzzles since I was young with my father, and that was kind of like our thing. We would do, like, see how fast we could get it put together. Sometimes my husband and I have some friends that we go visit. They have a house not far from here in Jasper, Tennessee. So they'll have us, come visit, and we do a puzzle for the whole weekend. And they get a really hard one. We brought them one. And so that's really kind of a fun thing. But I love crosswords, Sudoku. I love ciphers, hidden messages. What about you?
Well, I've been doing crosswords most of my life. That was been always my pastime. My parents got me into it. I love jigsaw puzzles also. When you're little, you love to throw them out all over the floor. Yes. And then you're like, oh, I have to hunt for them. Have to fight the cats usually. Give me that back. But when I was teaching, especially when I was teaching math or anything, I would always use logic puzzles. That way they would have to use the other parts of their brains to try to figure things out and think of it logically. And then anagrams, especially in English, we use those to help them learn more about the different types of words and all that. So puzzles and ciphers, definitely, cryptograms, anything that makes me want to figure out things, to the unpuzzle.
Well, I mean, mysteries too are a puzzle. So in a sense,
yes, absolutely. And that's probably one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah, sure. I don't know if Edgar Allan Poe actually did crossword puzzles. I didn't see any mention of it. Do you know?
I do not know, and that's one thing I'd like to research. There are, I was going to say, Chris Sempner is the curator of the Poe Museum in Virginia, and I met him back at the Poe Fest in October last year in Baltimore. And so I thought about reaching out to him to see if he does know, because I was like, if anybody does, he would probably know or figure it out. So,
well, I will say, whether or not he did them, he is huge in crosswords, because he's got a very good crossword name, a lot of vowels, and a lot of common letters like
Mhm.
L and N. So I've seen
Yeah.
Poe as an answer. I've seen Allen as an answer. I've seen the
Interesting.
Edgars. They always say
Mhm.
mystery award, literary mystery award, the Edgars. So he lives on in crosswords.
He does. He definitely does.
Yeah, and the Edgars that you just brought up actually came to be because of Murders in the Rue Morgue with Dupine, because of the, in the Gold Bug,
Right.
especially when he
Mhm.
put that type of cipher in the actual story. So that's
Right.
kind of when the Edgars came into existence, was because of that.
Mhm.
So
Oh, I
there's that
didn't.
tie with what you do with the puzzles too.
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
And I was going to say, AJ has been, I can't remember exactly which one it was, in the New York Times crossword puzzle.
That is true. I start the book with an anecdote about
Yes.
how about
Mhm.
7 years ago, I was the answer to one down. The
Yes.
clue was author of the know-it-all, AJ blank, and it was me,
Oh,
AJ
very cool.
Jacobs. And that, so I thought so too.
Mhm.
As a word nerd, I thought this is the highlight of my life. This is
Yes.
my wedding is pretty good, but this is great. And then I got an email the next day from my brother-in-law, who wrote a very brother-in-law email. He did congratulate me. He did, I will say that, but he also pointed out that I was in the Saturday puzzle. And if you know
Okay.
the New York Times, the puzzles
Sunday.
get harder and harder, and Saturday is
Yes.
the harder than Sunday. And
Yes.
all the answers are totally obscure. So his point was, this is not a compliment. This is just proof that no one knows who you are. Like, this is
No.
Ah,
proof you're totally obscure. So that was a
That was a
crushing blow.
jab.
yes. Oh,
I will
yes.
say that the final twist of the story is I told that tale on a podcast, and it happened that one of the crossword puzzle makers from the New York Times was listening, and he
Oh, cool.
did me a favor and put me in a Tuesday puzzle. So
Oh,
I
nice.
was able to get in, even though I don't really belong there. I'm not famous enough to be in a Tuesday puzzle, but I slipped in nonetheless.
Well, that's good.
Yes. Well, and I was going to say, tell you some other Poe friends of ours. They do Poe movies. My husband and I were just in Pittsburgh, and that's where they live, and we met up with them for dinner while we were there. And their son is just like in love with ciphers and can't get enough of them. And so I told her, and she already knew about your book. They're working on a little video about Edgar Allan Poe and ciphers and things.
Ooh.
And they shared an article about your book. And so I told her, I said, you've got to get your son the book. He's going to love it. And I said, he's
Oh,
got
thank you.
puzzles in it. And so just, she was really excited to hear that.
That's great. Yeah, and we have a Poe cipher, of course. I couldn't
Yes.
couldn't
Yes.
resist.
Yes. Well, so what, I was going to say, looking at all my questions, what did you find intriguing kind of about Edgar Allan Poe's, like the cipher he put in the Gold Bug and just his contest, out to the public and things like that?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think he was a fellow, whether or not he did crosswords, he was a puzzle junkie.
Hmm.
He was a word nerd.
Yes.
I know that he wrote he wrote defending puns, because some
Yes.
people say puns are the lowest form of humor, but Edgar Allan Poe defended them.
Mhm.
He also was excited. I read in the New Yorker that he was excited that his name could be anagrammed. So
Hmm.
Edgar Poe can be anagrammed to a god peer. So
Oh,
he was,
interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
he was on the left. He had quite an ego that so that was exciting. And but also one of his true loves was ciphers. As you say, he put one in the Gold Bug Variations,
Mhm.
but he was also a columnist for two newspapers that
Yes.
are not maybe they're still around. I am not a
Yeah.
subscriber.
I
Alexander.
I don't think they are, but maybe I
I
don't.
think one of them might be, but I
Yeah.
think,
Or
what
maybe a
isn't it, the
different
Graham's
name.
Quarterly?
Graham's
Graham's
Weekly
Lady
Messenger.
Magazine, Graham's
Yes.
Yes.
Lady, and
Yeah.
Alexander's Weekly Messenger.
Messenger.
So,
Yeah.
Yes.
and he
Yes.
did, ciphers for both of them. And in fact, he did a challenge to his readers. He,
Yes.
as I said, he had a healthy ego, and he said, I can crack any cipher you send me. and so he challenged the readers to send him ciphers. And just for those, because I actually wasn't 100% clear on what a cipher was, so just to make it clear, it's basically when you take a sentence and you change the letters so that it's hidden and the meaning is obscured, and you have to decode the cipher. And there are various ways to decode ciphers. The most common is called frequency analysis.
Okay.
Because certain letters in the English language are much more frequent than others. E is more frequent than Q or J. So if you are given a cipher where it's 100 letters and 18 of them are Q, then you say, you know what, maybe this Q is not a Q, it's an E or an A or an N, and you work your way back from there. Other ways to crack it are looking at, if it's a one-letter word, often that means it's A or I. If it's an apostrophe and then a letter, then that might be S. So there are all these strategies, and he was brilliant at it. So he challenged the readers to send him ciphers, which they did, and he would then crack them and print the answers in the following. And he, the first time he did, he was very dismissive. He's like, "This was too easy. Come on, give me something of a challenge."
Yes.
And then the interesting twist was he stopped the contest after a couple of maybe a year, but there were 2 ciphers that he said that he cracked, but he never printed the answer. He never, he just never, I don't know whether he didn't get around to it or he wanted to keep it mysterious. So
you wonder.
So these things were uncracked for decades. And finally, in 1991, a professor at the University of Chicago cracked one of the codes. The text turned out to be a passage from the play Cato by Joseph Addison.
Oh, interesting.
The second cipher wasn't decoded for another 9 years, and it was finally a guy named Gil Broza, who's a Toronto engineer, finally figured out the right answer. And what I love is I got to meet Gil Broza, because
cool.
he's a member of one of the nerdiest groups in the United States, probably the world, called the National Puzzlers League.
Oh, neat. Okay.
And there are about 700 members, and they are just like crazy obsessed with puzzles. And they are the type who, like, even the Saturday New York Times crossword puzzle is too easy. It's like,
wow.
So they're way over my head. They are much better than me, but they let me in.
Oh, definitely me too.
Yeah, so that was fun. And then I did print one in the in my book, which turned out the actual cipher itself was a riddle. So that was like an extra level. Like
a puzzle within a puzzle. Yes.
It was a puzzle within
kind of like a dream within a dream.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yes. Oh, very cool. Well, do you think that because it's kind of supposed that Poe did put possibly more ciphers, in his other works? Do you think that he probably did and nobody has just figured it out?
Oh, I love that idea. I hope that's true.
I hope it's true too. I kind of want to tackle some of them and see, because I know in we talked about this the other day. One of his poems, there's a lady's name woven into it. It's like the first line, first letter is the first letter of her name, and then so forth, so on, like second line, second letter. And he did that. And so kind of similar to acrostic, but not, but I kind of want to look and dig someday when I have time and see if he,
fun.
if there's anything we could possibly find.
Certainly sounds very Poe-like. I
Yeah.
do know another writer that I covered in the book was Lewis Carroll on
Yes.
Alice in Wonderland. And
Yes.
he was also a huge puzzle nerd and hid all sorts of puzzles. And I talked to this one Lewis Carroll scholar,
Okay.
of Carroll studies, and his greatest achievement in life, he considers, was that he found a secret code in through the looking glass that no one else had found
Wow.
like 10 years ago. And he said when he found it, I said, he almost fell off his chair in excitement. And it is so arcane and obscure, but I'll tell it to you. It was that it was the Queen of Hearts was talking about her birthday
Okay.
and how old she was.
Okay.
And he said that if you calculated the number of days, she said she was, 81 and a half years old or something. And if you calculated the number of days and then doubled them because she was a twin,
Okay.
then that number was the same as the number for 42 squared. And
Okay.
42 is Lewis Carroll's favorite number. He was obsessed with it and he hid it throughout all of his books.
Yes.
So that was, to me, I was like, that could be, in one sense, it is probably like the greatest waste of human time
Yes.
to be figuring this out. And in another sense, he's a hero to me that he took
Absolutely.
the time to
Yeah.
figure it out.
And I was going to say, and I think you mentioned this in the book too, with 42 with Douglas Adams. It's like, is that where he got that? You wonder.
There's a controversy. That
Oh,
is
yeah.
a heated debate within Lewis Carroll scholar circles.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is really, really neat. So kind of moving a little away from Poe, but with you immersing yourself into all the different types of puzzle worlds, what do you think makes humans so fascinated with solving different types of puzzles, just from your experience?
I think we were born to solve puzzles. We are wired to solve them. I mean, I think the first puzzle was how do you get food and how do you get a
Yeah.
mate? So I think that our brains are wired to hit us with dopamine or whatever good stuff our
Yeah.
brains create when we come up with them. And I think that's what makes us human, is that we can come up with unusual solutions to puzzles. So, getting the termites out of a termite mound with a stick, like that is a puzzle. And what I love, and a lot of people seem to love about puzzles, is that life can be messy, so there's not always that one clean solution. But with puzzles, it's almost the platonic ideal. You do have one solution, it's there. You sort of have a little sort of stretch of time where you're struggling and feeling hopefully positive frustration as opposed to really annoyed frustration.
Yes.
And then you get the aha moment, and that's what puzzle lovers talk about, the aha moment. And I think you get that too at the end of a mystery when an Agatha Christie or a Poe, and it's revealed and you're like, oh, it all clicks into place. And, I could have seen this, I should have seen that. And it's creating order out of chaos is another way that people talk about it.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's such satisfaction too when you are reading a mystery and you actually did solve it, and then and it confirms, because I've read all of the Agatha Christie novels, and it's been a while, and I'm thinking about rereading them just because I was a teen when I did it.
Right.
And I remember only solving a couple of them, and I was just like, yes, this is awesome.
I know.
Thinking like her.
It is a huge delight when you solve it. And I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes I delude myself into thinking at the end, I was like, oh yeah, I totally knew that, even though I didn't. I somehow convinced myself, yeah, that was one thing I was thinking about. So I kind of knew it. I guess I got it.
Yeah, I have done that before, and I'm like, no, I didn't do that. I want to believe I did that. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, and think about it. We wouldn't have the science that we have today if we
Mhm.
didn't have like the ancient Greeks or the Chinese or the Egyptians that really just delved into the puzzle of life
Right.
and started
Sure.
asking questions of for gravity and for the eureka moments of
Hmm.
wow, why did that happen? Why did the apple fall off the tree? Or
Yeah.
why did someone, grow tall like this or short like this? And
Hmm.
because science in itself is the epitome of the perfect puzzle.
Yeah.
I
Because
totally agree. And
Yeah.
you brought up the eureka moment, and as I imagine that was one of the original puzzles. And I think
Yes.
it was Archimedes, the Greek
yes,
mathematician. And
Hmm.
I may botch this story, so you can correct me, but I believe it was the king wanted to know the volume of the crown, like how much was it how much the volume was. And it was a weirdly shaped object, as crowns are. And Archimedes was thinking, how can I do this? He's like, all right, so I got to take a break. And he took a bath. And when he
yep,
got in the bath, he saw that the water rose, and that the water rose the exact amount that his volume was, because he displaced the water. And that's when he said, Eureka, which means I found it.
exactly,
So that was one
exactly.
of the first puzzles ever.
Yes,
That's really
yes, it
cool.
was.
And what's really kind of neat too, tying into this, is that Poe's work of science is called Eureka. He titled
Hmm.
it that.
I did not know that.
Yes,
Yes.
and it is believed that he did put some ciphers in Eureka. So
Oh,
I have read it. It is very deep entrenched into science and his beliefs on
Hmm.
science.
like what
Um,
are some of the topics he covers in Eureka?
oh, I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I've read it. It's a lot about
Is it
I can't
physics mostly, or
I
it
think it's forensics and physics and
in
most of the major
space and
sciences of
yeah,
like science or space and
yes.
constellations and those
wow,
type
I
of
had no
things.
Yeah.
idea.
It,
That's
it's
so
very
interesting.
interesting. It doesn't definitely scientists that have, proven different things that read it do not agree with it. I'll definitely say that, just some of the things I've read,
Yes.
but
Well, he's a
but it
writer.
was,
He's
he
not a scientist.
considered it one of his great works
Really?
because it was his version of his science. So,
Wow, that's so.
so
By the way, just throwing this out because it occurred
yeah.
to me, I live a block away from Edgar Allan Poe Street
Oh, very
Wow.
cool.
in New York City. 84th Street has
Yes.
been
Okay.
named Edgar Allan Poe Street because he
Oh,
lived here
nice.
apparently for a little
Yes.
bit.
Yes.
Yeah,
What
he
Yeah.
did
and
he do
Virginia
here?
moved.
What's
Yeah,
Yeah.
she actually died. The cottage in Fordham before it became the Bronx
Yeah.
is where they lived, and they moved there to kind of get away because back then it was out in the country,
Mhm.
and that's actually where she died there in 1847.
Oh, I
And
didn't
so
know.
yes, and I've been to the cottage. It's really neat, and they have a lot of the things kept just like it was when they lived there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
I'll
really
have to
neat.
check that out.
Yeah, and then it's called Poe Park, and there's a bench in Poe Park where Batman was born. That where there were
Yeah, the guy who wrote
yes,
Batman, he was sitting on that bench when he
in
had
Poe
his
Park.
Eureka moment
Yes,
and
for
wrote
Oh,
Batman.
Batman.
wow.
So that's
Interesting.
why everything just connects so
Yeah,
just
sure.
intertwines.
The
It's a
piece of the
puzzle.
It
universe.
is.
That's
Yes.
Yeah.
right. I
Yeah.
wonder if he was thinking raven, black animal, and then he
Yeah.
went to bat. Let's give Poe credit for that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
We
Exactly.
agree with that. We agree with that.
Yeah. And so besides like Lewis Carroll's works, have you run across any other books that you've read that incorporate like ciphers or puzzles, riddles, things like that?
Other than the
Jane
mystery.
Austen,
Yeah, yeah.
a
Jane
mystery.
Austen.
Well, Jane
Okay.
Austen was a huge fan of
Okay.
riddles. They were called charades.
Oh,
Is the
okay.
time that, And we think of charades as the game where you don't talk and
Yes.
do syllable by syllable, but the original charades are actually written down. And so every line of a poem was a clue to a different syllable. So
Okay.
if the syllable was, I'm just making this, if
Yeah.
the word was elbow,
Okay.
then the first line of the poem might be about, a Chicago train that goes up in the
Yes.
sky. And then the
Yes.
second line might be about, what you wrap your presents with, and it's
Okay.
elbow.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
so she was into that. There
Okay.
were Tolkien has a lot of riddles.
Mhm.
Harry Potter has a lot of riddles and a lot of anagrams. I know
Okay.
that Voldemort is translates.
Tom Riddle, literally, his last
Yeah.
name was
Well,
Riddle.
true.
There you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of puzzle loving writers, and yeah, so Poe is not he has plenty of company.
Yes.
Now,
Absolutely.
you said you used the quarantine time to use this as your opportunity to research and find all this. Kind of what was your first starting point to figure out how you can put a book together about puzzles and everything?
That's a good question. For me as a writer, and I don't know Poe what his process was, but for me,
Mhm.
I before I start a book, I need to have a structure. So for instance,
Okay.
my first book was about reading the encyclopedia and what I learned and what my life was like. And I realized I can do it chapter A, chapter B, chapter C, and I can put words in each
Mhm.
chapter that relate to. So if I'm talking about my relationship with my father, I might put it under Freud, comma Sigmund, and
Okay.
so I have a very strict structure. So for this
Okay.
one, my structure was twofold. First, I thought there are all of these types of puzzles that have huge communities totally devoted to them. There's the jigsaw fanatics, there's the crossword fanatics, but there's also the Japanese wooden box the puzzle box fanatics.
Mhm.
And these are these beautiful wooden boxes that take hours to open, and they're secret panels, and
That's so
you
neat.
spin them.
Most definitely.
Yeah, so it's cool. So anyway, I was like, I can just do 18 chapters on these 18 different types of puzzles. And then the
Okay.
other thing I wanted to do was what Poe did, which was to embed puzzles within the book. So
Yes.
there are secret puzzles hidden in the book. There are not so secret puzzles where, it's like, here's the first crossword puzzle, and you get to solve the first crossword puzzle. So that was how I came up with the idea.
Oh, very cool.
Very neat. Has anyone solved your contest yet?
It has been solved, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Yes. So
Awesome. Awesome.
this was yes, in the book. I was inspired by another book. I don't know if you remember, maybe you're not old enough, but this book, Masquerade by Kit Williams, and it came
I've
out.
heard of it.
I think
Haven't
I've
read
heard
it.
of it too.
Haven't
Yes.
read it, but I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
I read it as a kid because it came out in, like, I guess 1981, and
Okay.
it was a British book with beautiful illustrations and weird poetry, and hidden in the illustrations were clues to an actual buried treasure, a golden hare, a golden rabbit somewhere in England, and it actually caused chaos all over England. People were digging up everyone's yards, trespassing, falling off cliffs. It was like
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
That's
so
something you don't want to have
I
to
don't want
answer for.
right. I don't want that liability. So someone did find that after a couple of years. But I love the idea of hiding a puzzle with a prize in my book.
Okay.
So I didn't do it. I didn't want to bury it and get people's yards dug up. So mine
Right.
was, you had to decode a cipher in the introduction to the book. And then once you did that, it would lead you to a website where once you put the password into the website, it opened up to a series of 27 crazy puzzles that I did not make. My
Wow.
friend Greg
Oh,
Swiska made. And they are on still. I loved them so much I kept them up. And you don't even have to buy the book if
Okay.
you don't want to, but if you want some free awesome puzzles, try thepuzzlerbook.com.
Okay.
And it'll give you hints to the password if you don't want to try to figure it out. And then once you put the password in, it'll open up to these crazy puzzles that are so
Okay.
delightful. And they're all about the history of puzzles. So it's like,
Oh, nice. Okay.
yeah, the puzzles about puzzles.
Okay. Oh, that is amazing.
That is awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Greg Pliska and his team did it, and they
Yeah.
did an amazing job.
Yeah, we'll
Very
definitely have
cool.
to check that out,
Oh, yeah.
and we'll share that with our on
With our
our
people.
yes.
Yes, on
Great,
our
yeah. I
Yes,
think they'd
abs-
enjoy it, and also the Poe cipher, which I
Yes.
actually wrote a mental floss article. So if they don't want to buy the book, which I hope they do,
Absolutely.
don't-
Yes.
if they
It
don't
is a
want to.
very good read. I loved it.
yes.
But you can also Google mental floss Edgar Allan Poe cipher,
Okay.
and it will give you an article about, uh, his crazy cipher contest.
Okay. Oh,
Awesome.
Awesome.
Definitely look that up too.
Yes. Yes, we will.
Yes.
Anything else you want to add for the puzzlers of the world out there?
Let me think. Well, I just want to say thank you for doing the podcast. I mean,
Yes.
I
Thank
love it.
you.
I've
Thank
listened
you.
to several episodes, and
Yeah.
I think it's great. And I just think it's great that you're passionate about literature and books and words and mysteries and puzzles. So,
Well, thank you. She's a retired teacher and she's
Yeah.
taught all four of the core
Main
subjects.
yeah.
And
Wow.
I am a current freshman English teacher in a high school. And
Wow.
so words come natural to
Yes,
us.
yes. The puzzle of life comes very natural to teachers because we have to
Yes.
puzzle out the life of our children
Yes.
that we have in the classroom because each day you don't know what you're going to get.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's
Well, that's
fun.
a very
It's
hard
fun.
puzzle. Kids are a
And
hard puzzle. Yeah.
yes.
Yes, it's
And
an ever-changing puzzle.
And I know, like, whenever, like, I do like just mini lessons with grammar because they really don't want us to do like hour and a half long episodes of it, or episodes,
I
lessons.
understand. Yes.
It's like an
If you
episode
call
each
them
block.
episode, yeah, they
Yes,
might
it's
like
an
it better.
but I always start with grammar is the math of English.
Mhm.
And the kids who are math brained, they get that and they understand it a little bit better because they can kind of attack grammar in a little bit different way because of all the set rules that grammar has. And it helps them embrace it more because the students who are definitely literature minded and more word sensical, they don't mind grammar so much. But you
Yeah.
really have to, you got to kind of tweak your kind of sales pitch, I guess is the best way to
Right.
say it, in trying to get kids to understand grammar because,
Totally.
you're going to become a better writer regardless of whatever you do. And
Yeah.
I always tell kids, you're going to write the rest of your life. It's going to be reports at work, emails. You need to know how to communicate.
Yeah. You know, my favorite grammar puzzle or riddle or mystery, you probably heard of it. The sentence buffalo, 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 buffalo is a grammatically correct sentence in English.
Interesting. I don't think I've heard of that one.
Oh yeah, Google it. There's a
I
Wikipedia,
will. Yeah.
because it is, I mean, it's hilarious. It's part, some of them are capital buffalo. So basically it's using buffaloes from the city of Buffalo.
Okay.
And there's buffalo, the verb, which means to kind of harass or
Yes.
battle.
Yes.
So it is,
Adjective.
Yes.
and they've structured it in a way that using those three different meanings of buffalo, this is actually a sentence that makes sense. Buffalo, 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 buffalo.
Interesting. That's cool. That is really cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Definitely you can use that in class next time.
I can. Absolutely. All right. Well, AJ, thank you
Yes.
so much for your time. I know you said you're on a writing deadline and everything, and we just appreciate you so much
Yes.
taking time out for us today.
My pleasure. I had a great time, and thank you again.
All right.
And
Thank
we look
you.
forward to more books from you.
Yes,
So
I'm going to go
Yeah.
look into other books you've read too, because you are an
Are
amazing
written.
writer, and I mean that
Thank you.
sincerely.
yes.
Thank you.
You
I'm
have an
honored.
awesome day, and thank you for joining us.
Yes.
My pleasure.
All right. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye bye.
In the present case, indeed in all cases of secret writing, the first question regards the language of the cipher. For the principles of solution, so far especially as the more simple ciphers are concerned, depend upon and are varied by the genius of the particular idiom.